Thank you so much, Krishna, and the Map Academy for having me here. It's quite a singular honor to be presenting this publication. It's this presentation. I don't know whether I'll live up to that really, really lovely introduction of mine that you all have put together from a really haphazard CV that I sent you. But thank you very much. Now, the story of Indian spices is a very complicated story, and it's a very, very difficult story to tell because you jump to and fro and back and forth in time and space too often. So I'm going to try and do this as well, object wise as possible, and keep it as tight as possible. I've been warned that we have to do this in an hour. So I have about 45 minutes to do the talk. And I really hope that there'll be lots and lots of questions and we can, exchange stuff. And I get to learn with every one of these talks. So that's always a very big plus point for me. Now, all of us in India are familiar with some sort of box like this in our kitchens. This is, a microcosm of the Indian spice box: haldi, mirchi, dhania, jeera, rai, methi, akha jeera, some whole spices. This is a very, very simple kind of masala box that you'll see in almost all households across the length and breadth of the country. But so much of this is not Indian. So much of this has come to India over time and space. And so many of these things have changed as time passes. So the spice box itself has gone from being a wooden box to a stainless steel box to a wooden glass box for presentation purposes and things like that. And even very, very simple plastic boxes. Many people at homes will have separate boxes for powdered masalas, separate boxes for whole spices, and it all depends on how you organize your kitchen. And there are many who will just work out of little plastic packets of Everest masala and stuff like that. Whichever way you do it, there is no right way or wrong way. But when we talk about spices, this is the number one spice in the world. There is no spice like chilies. Chilies are eaten by more than a quarter of the world's population on every single day. Uh, it's probably rivaled only by corn to some extent and rice, which are eaten perhaps by larger numbers of humans on this planet. But chilies are the number one spice as far as we're concerned. And we've had chilies for a very, very long time, but not in India. So chili peppers, also called chile, chili pepper, chili, comes from the Nahuatl word, which is the old Aztec word, chili. They're basically a berry. Yes, I know it's difficult to think of a chili as a berry. You're thinking of strawberries and blueberries and things like that, and you're really not thinking of biting into a chili berry, right? They belong to a genus called capsicum. That is the genus. There are at least five cultivated species. They're all members of the Solanaceae family. And this is where it gets very interesting. This means that they're basically cousins of the potato and the tomato. Yep. The potato and the tomato, along with the chili, have all come to us from the New World, okay, from Mexico. And they have a kissing cousin who's lived in Asia and Europe for the longest time, aka the aubergine or the bengan. So these are all from the Solanaceae family, and they're all cousins to each other, and they have surprisingly different taste profiles, and we eat different parts of them. So in the case of the potatoes, we eat the tubers, etc., etc. The word chili probably came from Chilpocli, Chiltepin, or Chiltepin in the Aztec Nahuatl language. Now, the earliest chilies that we know about came from Bolivia. They were first cultivated, so there were wild chilies in Bolivia, they were cultivated in Mexico, and the Columbian exchange, which is named after Christopher Columbus, was responsible for spreading a large number of chili peppers around the world. And by the way, they were called chili peppers by Mr. Columbus himself. Why he called them chili peppers was probably because the closest flavor that he had in his flavor bank was pepper. And this was called chili, so he called them chili peppers. Um, they came from the New World to the Old World, that is Europe and Asia, in 1492 on Columbus's second voyage. And there's a lot of argument about exactly which species came first and which species came second and how we dealt with it and so on and so forth. But suffice to say that, well, they came to uh, Europe, cultivated in Europe briefly as a very interesting herb to cultivate, and they didn't really take off as far as uh, growing them in bulk was concerned for some time. Now we know that chili peppers have been eaten in South America as early as 7,500 BC. That's 9,500 years ago, way before there was even cultivation in these areas, and they were being eaten by our wild uh, autochthonous cousins in the South Americas. We know that the first chilies were domesticated sometime around 4000 BC in the Ecuador region. And Columbus, as I told you, saw them first. He called them red peppers because they were red in color. And pepper, as I told you, was the taste that he could tell. And Diego Alvarez Chancha, a doctor who was with Columbus on the second voyage, basically brought the first chilies back to Spain. They were just botanical curiosities. Oh my God, so spicy and stuff like that. And it took a little time for them to pick up. And then people realized that you could dry these chilies or turn them into a paste and use them to spice food in really small quantities, and that they grew virtually anywhere. They were very easy to grow, they were very easy to hybridize, and they were way, way cheaper than this pepper, which came only from India. So the heat that you feel from the chili is because of a compound called capsaicin. And eating this compound triggers a massive fear reflex in our body, telling us that we should spit this out immediately. But we have turned that into something that excites our taste buds, gets our, you know, salivary glands all excited, and all of those receptors, instead of telling us, warning us about the danger, are now giving us so much more flavor than ever before. The heat of chilies is well counted in something called Scoville units, thanks to a very interesting pharmacist called William Scoville, who figured out a very, very scientific way of understanding the pungency of the amount of capsaicin in it. And there's everything from your bell peppers or doble mirchi or shimla mirchi, as we call them in India, which have zero capsaicin levels, okay, or as close to zero. It's usually 1 to 0. And then everything goes up towards the famous Bhut Jolokia chilies, or the spiciest naturally grown variant of chilies. And then from the Bhut Jolokia, crossing these with the Trinidad Scorpion and various other cultivars, we have some really, really crazy hot spicy chilies that are now being grown in the Americas. The Carolina Reaper is one of the most common of them, clocking at over 2 million Scoville units, and that's twice as spicy as a Bhut Jolokia chili, or a Naga chili, or a ghost pepper, as it's known. These are being cultivated in pretty decently large amounts in America, and you'd wonder as to where the Americans suddenly discovered this amazing taste for things so spicy. Well, you'd be surprised at who's using this. This Carolina Reaper, dried Carolina Reaper chili powder is being used by almost every single one of the large chains. The large burger chains, etc., that are there in America, the large pizza chains, all have centralized workshops, centralized factories where they make their spices and distribute them to the rest of the country. They figured out that if they switch their regular chilies for Carolina Reapers, then the weight of the packaging goes down. And when you're looking at trans America passage of these goods, the actual weight is considerable and it actually brings in a considerable profit. So it's not really for its heat, but in making things cheaper that it's being grown. There are at very, very conservative average about 4,000 different varieties of chilies on the planets. There are mainly 5 species: Capsicum annum, Bacatum, Chinense, Frutescens, and Pubescens. Of these, Capsicum annum is the biggest, most popular, most famous group, and it comes from the famous different chili varieties or cultivars that we get from the Mexico region. Uh, Most of our Indian chilies are annum and chinense crossed together, and there are a few rare wild varieties of chilies still available in the Americas. And there are, well, more than 28 different subspecies, blah, 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 blah. There are books devoted to chilies. And before the Portuguese brought them, what the hell were Indians eating? If chilies were not Indian and they didn't come to India till the 15th century AD, then actually the 16th century to be more realistic, what the hell were we eating till then? Well, the chilies did come to India and they spread all over the nation. And very much like Christopher Columbus, everywhere in India we name them after black peppercorns. So, whatever the word for chili is, in whatever vernacular language you speak, it is a variant of the word for black peppercorns. Before the arrival of the Portuguese, we used pepper, we use trifle, and we use pipli or long pepper. So that's long pepper on the bottom right hand side. Above that is tirfal or tepal, and these were used by us along, of course, with regular pepper or pipum nigrum or round pepper. Tirfal is basically Xanthellum retsa, and Piper longum is what you're seeing below. Now, these were the most common heat-giving spices. There were others. There are a whole host of other variants that we use, but these are essentially the ones that were grown mainly in the eastern and western Ghats of India, but concentrated in the region of Kerala, with some extensions into the Mangalore region and some extensions onto the other side in Tamil Nadu. This was a very intensive crop. It was very specific to the region in which it grew, and this made it a very, very treasured commodity. Now, the chili, when it arrived, was suddenly something that could be grown anywhere. It was very easy to hybridize and bring out your own varieties that you wanted to, and it was cheap to grow. So it just rapidly took over and displaced the king of spices at that time, the peppercorn. Now, the earliest mentions we have of chili peppers in India come from the verses of the famous Vijayanagara saint and court poet Purandaradasa. And he was the court poet of the great Krishna Deva Raya. And he talks about the chili as growing from green to red as reflective of the Lord Vishnu himself. And in one of his compositions, he says that the chili is a boon to the poor people, and goes on and waxes eloquent about the chili. So Purandara Dasa, talking about the chili in the 16th century AD, is perhaps one of the big events in spice history. In India, chilies take time to slowly work their way up. They go through Maharashtra. We have a beautiful 17th century AD book called the Bhojana Kutuhala, the joy of eating. I mean, what greater joy is there? And Raghunatha, the author, basically talks about chilies in detail. So chilies have already by the 17th century hit Maharashtra and are going north. And sometime in the Mughal text, the Ain Akbari, we start looking for the food of the Mughal court, and we find the chili completely absent. Nope, it's not there at all. So the chilies went to Rajasthan via the trade route. The Rajasthanis took to the chilies. Very, very few spices grew in Rajasthan. Rajasthan is an arid to semi-arid region, and well, there just isn't any chili happening there. Any pepper happening there. And when chilies arrived, they just exploded. The number one chili in Rajasthan is something called the Mathania chili, and it's one of the most intriguingly grown chilies in the entire country, in the entire subcontinent. You'll hear a lot of old timers saying that the Mathania chilies just don't taste as smoky and original as they used to, and there is probably a very interesting story about this. Researchers have come across the fact that Mathania chilies were originally fertilized by the ashes from the burning ghats where, well, human bodies were cremated. This very rich in potassium and various other minerals product, this ash, was used as a fertilizer to grow chilies and was responsible for the unique flavor of the Mathania chili of Rajasthan. Of course, today Rajasthani growers of Mathania chilies will swear that this is absolutely an urban myth, uh, apocryphal, so on and so forth. Now, whether it is true or not, it is a fact that the Mathania chili today is no longer as smoky as it used to be. There are stories that say that it was during the reign of Jahangir and Shah Jahan that the chili finally made it into the Ganga Yamuna Doab, and that when Shah Jahan decided to shift his capital, the Unani and Ayurvedic practitioners were aghast because they felt that the waters of the Yamuna were terrible for the human constitution, and they asked the emperor, they begged him to move away. The emperor said, too late. This building project is coming up. This is my project number one. I don't give a damn. Find a way to combat this problem. And the apocryphal story goes on to tell us that this is why we have chaat in the Ganga Valley, because something spicy and something salty was advocated by both Unani and Ayurvedic practitioners, so that eating these chilies and rich, spicy, salty, fried, and sour, yeah, so there's like a whole lot of things going on, would all make it easier for us to digest the alkali rich waters of the Yamuna. Now, it's a great sounding story, but how true it is and how true it isn't is, well, up to us to decide, because there's no way to prove it one way or the other. Ultimately, it is during the reign of Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, in the middle of the 19th century, that sometime in the 1840s or so, chilies first enter the Mughal kitchen. So all of the food that we call Mughlai today, which is a absolute misnomer, is not the food of the Mughal court and is not what the Mughals ate. So every single region of India now grows chilies. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Nagaland and Arunachal Pradesh to Kutch, there is not a single state, not a single district in this country that I know of which doesn't have a chili variety of its own, unless it's probably Trans Himalaya or, well, something in the deepest Rajasthan deserts. Uh, there are yellow chilies, there are green chilies, which are eaten fresh. Yellow chilies, by the way, dried. There are certain varieties of white chilies. There are long chilies, there are round chilies, there are crinkled chilies, there are smooth skin chilies. There is absolutely no dearth of the variety of chilies physically that we have. Lal mirch is what we call it in Hindi, as opposed to gol mirch, as we call black pepper, or kali mirch. Uh, the words are all associated, as I said, with the words for black pepper. In Kashmiri, marstu, in Tamil, milagai, uh, just to mention a few names, okay? Gol morich, kalo morich, lal morich in Bengali, for example. So, right from Kashmir, which grows the famous Kashmiri chilies, which are for color and flavor, to the Naga Bhut Jolokia, which is for just pungent heat and some very interesting taste. The most common chilies, of course, are the Guntur chilies and the Byadgi chilies of Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh. And you have beautiful, very, very mild chilies like the Bhavnagari that come to us from Gujarat, and the Shankeshwari that come to us from South Maharashtra. The Boer chilies, the round ball-like chilies that you use for curries and things like that. And as I said, there's just no putting the chili down. Now, this is one of the most interesting things that I can show you. Roughly 53% of the chilies in the country are grown by Andhra Pradesh itself. And almost every single big masala company has its chili HQ in Andhra, in and around Hyderabad, somewhere or the other. And as I said, the number one chili used in most of our spice mixes is actually the Guntur chili. So Karnataka comes close along with West Bengal at about 8%, MP grows 7%, and everywhere else in the country, it's either negligible or somewhere between 5 to 1%. Jammu and Kashmir don't register. Nagaland with its Bhut Jolokia doesn't register. Okay. Kerala doesn't register, even though they have their own varieties of chilies. Just to give you an idea that the sheer bulk of chilies produced by Andhra Pradesh is so much that all the chilies in Nagaland don't really feature in numbers. So what's all this ado about pepper? This is my friend Ramesses II, the bull triumphant against Ethiopia, and there is Ramesses holding his axe and holding three of his Ethiopian enemies captive and holding them by the hair in a rather derogatory manner. One of the longest lived pharaohs, he ruled for over 60 years. He had hundreds of great grandchildren by the time he died. And He is the most important person for studying the beginnings of the Indian spice business. When Ramesses died, he was mummified. That's his mummy on the right hand side. And when you mummify something, a lot of the body parts shrink down and need to be filled up again. His nostrils had shrunk and they had to be propped up. And when we cleaned out the mummy of Ramesses the Great, we found that his nostrils were filled with peppercorns. Ramesses died in 1213 BC, and the only source in the world at that time for peppercorns, close enough to be exploited by Ramesses, was the west coast of South India. So it was probably from Kerala that chilies were going out in the 13th century BC all the way to Egypt. And the only way that I can see them going is by sea, because chili is being carried by land from Kerala through Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat, across, into Sindh, and from there via Afghanistan or directly into Iran from southern Pakistan. Just makes no sense for that roundabout route. Those peppers would be dead by the time they reached Egypt. Surprisingly, we have absolutely no clue who was selling these peppercorns to the Egyptians in Egypt at that time. It's one of the great mysteries in the Indian spice trade, and it's one of the haunting questions as far as archaeologists are concerned. But once we started sending peppers out, we didn't stop. Peppers soon became black pepper here, became the number one tradable commodity in the world. It was called black gold. It was valued incredibly highly. On the left-hand side, top, the picture that you have, those three pictures that make up that graphic on the left, are basically from the site of Berenike, which is right up the Red Sea and is one of the most important ports for disembarking when you come from the Indian trade. These pots that we found buried in the ground and they were covered by flat stone slabs, were called doliums and had more than 7 kilos of peppercorns still inside them after almost 1,600 years. And that's the lady in charge of the paleobotany department taking them out. And that picture inside shows you some of the dehydrated peppercorns that were there. Apocryphal or not, but the excavator tells us that when the lid was first opened on the pots, you could still smell the pepper. By 70 BC, way before the Red Sea was supposed to have been opened up to Rome, we have Pliny the Elder telling us about the Roman trade with India and so much pepper that was coming in. We know from much earlier that we have pepper coming in because the Greek scholars, Eratosthenes, Epicurus, etc., telling us by the 3rd century BC at the very latest that both round and long black pepper were coming to Greece. Uh, this is a very, very interesting set of letters that we have that have survived on thin wooden plates, which made up books and on which scribes would write letters to be sent to the loved ones of soldiers serving on Hadrian's Wall. From the side of Vindolanda, we have this beautiful tablet that you see on the bottom right hand side, and it tells us about the different goods that the men wanted. These things include cloaks, thongs, tallow, and in the case of Gambak, son of Tapo, he wants peppercorns. Excavating the various different latrines of Hadrian's Wall, we find peppercorn fragments. So peppercorn shells, by the way, do not get digested. So when you coarsely crush a pepper, please note that all the bits of the peppercorn shell are all going to be extruded by your body the next day or maybe the day after that. And archaeologists are absolute ghouls, foul people. We love digging up latrines and things like that to see what people ate. And not only in the officers' latrines, but in the latrines of the common people, the common soldiers on duty, on guard at Hadrian's Wall in the 3rd century AD. We know for a matter of fact that pepper was available even to the most common legionary. So this on the right hand side is the Muziris Papyrus. It tells us of a contract between a ship's captain and two investors to go to Muziris in southern India and bring back a load of peppercorns. Now, Once this was done, the other side was used for something else. And thanks to the other side, it survived. The other side is completely of no interest to us. But we love this bit about this entire deal that was cut to bring back peppercorns from Muziris. And we believe today that we found Muziris at the site of Pattanam in Kerala. Now, it's known as the king of spices. After the Indo-Roman trade dried up, it was the Arabs that picked up the pepper trade, and the Arabs were responsible for spreading pepper in all directions. We have what we jokingly call the Pax Islamica that takes place after the rise of Islam, and Islam comes out of both the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf and controls all the pepper trade to Europe via the Venetians. So the Venetians are the only people who work with the Arabs, and the Arabs sell everything they can to the Venetians, who then bump up the prices even further and ultimately make them, well, really, really expensive when they get to Europe. So, pepper was one of the earliest commodities traded between the Orient and Europe. Uh, Rent, dowry, payments, all kinds of things, taxation could be paid in peppercorns. So, there's a joking term today called peppercorn rent, which is the most trivial rent that you can pay in England. And we have beautiful documents going back hundreds of years where a token rent of one peppercorn was to be paid if demanded, and you can see that highlighted in pink below. And pepper traders had their own surnames: Pepperer in England, Pfeffersack in Germany, Pourier in France, so on and so forth. Alexandria, Genoa, Venice all became what they became thanks to the prosperity of this priceless commodity. This, along with a ton of spices moving through Alexandria, actually gave us the word spices because there was a special register for the taxation of all these materials that were coming from the east up the Red Sea and ultimately to Alexandria. So from the SPCs, or the special list, we have the term spices. This is my friend Vasco da Gama, who famously went to the drama in his pajama. Vasco da Gama came to India for two very, very specific reasons. And these reasons were for souls and spices. In that order, ladies and gentlemen. Souls and spices? No. Spices and souls. So while you might all think that the main purpose of the Portuguese was to convert everybody to Christianity, no. They came for the spices because they figured out that the spices were very, very expensive, worth an arm and a leg. And if they could send their own ships to India and circumvent the Arab trade routes, then they could make millions out of this. A single ship going back would make the fortunes of dozens of people. A single ship. So even if only 1 in 3 ships got back from the round trip from Europe to India and back with peppercorns, it was still winner winner chicken dinner. It contributed hugely to the trade routes that took place. It made the trade routes really possible. The Dutch, the British all came to India, the French, uh, the Danish all came to India thanks mainly to pepper and other spices. India's black pepper production was 70,000 metric tons in 2022. The largest producer of this spice is Kerala, with about 60.5% of the total business. Karnataka is beginning to catch up and is producing more and more peppercorns, but their last production is about 36,000 tons, and we expect them to be upping their production. Also, the most famous peppercorns as far as Indian peppercorns are concerned are the Tellicherry peppercorns. And the Tellicherry peppercorns are hugely premium all over the world, though sadly not perhaps as popular in India as they should be. Much to my surprise, when I first started studying spices, guess who produces the most pepper? Not India. Well, the world's black pepper production is led by Vietnam, is followed by Brazil, and then Indonesia, and India comes in a distant fourth after being the mother lode of pepper for all these years. Global production is roughly 855,000 tons. of which less than 10% is produced by India. Now, this is tirfal, and tirfal is a very, very interesting spice, also known as tepal or the Indian Sichuan peppercorn. Tirfal is a spice native to India's west coast. It's very, very prominent amongst the Konkani and Goan cuisines, Sindhudurg, Ratnagiri, Goa, and even the Mangalore coast use this a lot. It's a lemony, peppery spice if you bite into it. The Goans can't cook their dal curry without it, and they sensibly believe that it is very, very important to cook dal with this because it reduces flatulence. It is a younger cousin of the Sichuan peppercorn. Xanthoxylum redsa, as it is known in Latin, is a cousin of the peppercorn, Sichuan peppercorn, twice removed. The Sichuan peppercorn is smaller, redder, and way more pungent than the tirfal is. And ladies and gentlemen, by the way, the Sichuan peppercorn actually works by numbing most of your taste receptors. It's that strong. On the other hand, interestingly for us, there is an intermediate cousin between the tirfal and the Sichuan peppercorn, and is called the timur, and is used all over the Himalayas. It's one of the most popular spices in Nepalese food, and you will also find it, as I said, in other parts in Ladakh and in Himachal and in Uttaranchal and various other places. So the tirfal, the long pepper, and the round pepper were the OG heat-giving spices to all our food. Fish curries on the west coast of India still cannot be cooked in Ratnagiri, Sindhudurg, and Goa without this spice. There are a lot of spices that are not necessarily Indian. On the bottom left-hand side is allspice powder, sometimes called pimenta dioica. It's a tree from the Caribbean and Central America, and it gives you a kind of garam masala flavor along with heat at the same time. It tastes like cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. Uh, it's just a very, very fascinating spice in its own right. Is used all over the Caribbean. Your Caribbean jerk chicken seasoning, a lot of interestingly new Middle Eastern meat dishes, American pumpkin pies. All of these owe their slightly warm, spicy flavor to this spice. On the other hand, what we have on the right hand side is called nak kesar. I first came across nak kesar when I went to make my family's secret dhansak masala recipe and found that one of the ingredients in a 3.5 kilo recipe was 200 grams of nak kesar, and I'd never heard of this before. This is Mesua feria. It's a very, very interesting tree. It's a beautiful hardwood tree with absolutely gorgeous flowers. It's used in a lot of places just for its fragrant flowers and how beautiful it looks. It's a slow growing hardwood tree. It's also called the Ceylonese ironwood tree, and it's very, very important for its wood. Just by the by, its fruit pods or dried seed pods are also used as a spice called nakkesar. Sadly, a spice that's disappearing from India, even though it was part of trade and then later grown in South India in large quantities. We then come to one of our favorite spices in India, cinnamon. Much to the sadness of most Indians, what we call cinnamon is not really cinnamon. What we call cinnamon or taj is what you see on the left-hand side. True cinnamon is what you see on the right-hand side. This is Cinnamon zelanicum on the right-hand side, which is the true cinnamon, and it comes to us from Indonesia and Sri Lanka. And what you see on the left-hand side is Cinnamon chinense or Chinese cinnamon, sometimes called Indian cinnamon. Commonly, the correct name for this is cassia bark. And the leaves of the cassia bark tree are the tamalpatra or tejpatra that we use in our to cook our rice, and in the east to make all our beautiful variants of the payasam. Okay, this is the plant that we use in India and not the one that you see on the right hand side. Though surprisingly, both of them are seen as early as 1100 BC being used in Egypt to make mummies smell nice. This is another incredibly interesting pair of cousin spices. These are the cardamoms. The black cardamom or the bada elcha or the bada ilaichi, and the green cardamom or the choti ilaichi. Now, the bada elcha comes to us from the Himalayan foothills and is one of the autochthonous OG spices of India, and we've been using this for a very, very long time. On the other hand, much to everybody's surprise, the green cardamom is not from India, but it comes to us from the Spice Islands, the Moluccas, and came to India relatively later compared to the original Bada Ilaicha or the black Ilaichi. The green one is usually used as a sweet spice, whereas the black one is used in cooking biryanis and meats and so on and so forth. One of the most important spices as far as Indians are concerned is the clove, the lavang or the loving, native to Indonesia, but now grown all over the place in large quantities in Brazil, of all the places in the world. Again, comes to us from the Moluccas, the Spice Islands, Bacan, Makian, Moti, Ternate, Tidore. These are the Spice Islands where it comes from. This is the bud of a plant. Yes, you nip off the bud before it fully flowers, otherwise the ball inside it falls off. Okay, and you really don't get the flavors that you want. It's too late. So you nip the buds and then you let them dry. And the best of the best quality will be slightly oily to look at. And those rarely ever come into the common market. And sadly, even the best ones grown in India today in Kerala are all exported. They were probably traded first by the people that we know as the Austronesian people. These people whose ancestors now live in Madagascar and the Andaman Islands and a few of the Polynesian islands and Australia were responsible for massive sailing voyages all around the Indian Ocean and into the Pacific via the Straits of Malacca. And these were the people who carried a vast variety of different spices to and fro and brought these spices, we believe, with them. Now, the earliest known cloves come from a place called Terka in Syria. There's a bit of argument about whether those are cloves or not because they're badly charred. They definitely reached Rome by the first century AD and were very, very, very much a part of trade that went via India. Whether they were grown in India this early or not, we aren't very sure. The earliest actual cloves that we find are from the 9th, 10th, 11th centuries AD, from the Mantai excavations in Sri Lanka. But they're also mentioned in the Ramayana, though it may be a later interpolation, it doesn't look like that. They are definitely mentioned by Charaka in the Charaka Samhita, the great Ayurvedic text, which is dated to the 5th, 6th century BC. So it's definitely telling us that we've had cloves in India for 2,500 years. And definitely India could have been a conduit, if not a producer, of cloves for the famous Indo-Roman trade. And that's how they reached Rome by the 1st century AD. We know about them from China also. I'm telling you this is that China also uses a large number of spices in its food and that they all came this way and this way and that way and went hither and thither. This is one of the most beautiful spices in the world. This is mace and nutmeg, or jaifal and zavitri as we call it. Zavitri is the outer covering of the seed. That's the fruit that you see on the right hand side. That's a fresh fruit that's been cut in half to pop the inside out. The seed is that black bit that you see inside it. This red bit that you see on top of it is basically the mace. It's a milder uh, spice. The nutmeg inside is a stronger spice. They have a large amount of alkaloids in them, which are responsible for giving us this flavor. The red part is called the aril. The black part inside on the right is called the nut. The nut is dried, then cracked, and the kernel of the nut is what you see on the left-hand side below. And as the aril dries, it can go anything from a deep red to a very, very pale orange, depending on the variety of the tree. Now, this is one of the most interesting stories of spice in the world. When we talk about the British colonies in Asia, we talk about India as being the OG British colony. But the OG British colony was actually a tiny little island in the Moluccas, in the Spice Islands, called the island of Run. RUN. And this was staked by a man called Captain Nathaniel in the name of the British Crown. It was one of the 10 islands on which nutmeg grew, and at this time there was an enormous amount of plague running rampant through Europe because the Europeans, well, weren't exactly having a bath often enough and were, well, not into so much cleanliness and garbage disposal, and their cities were growing really fast due to industrialization. So doctors wore these long beaked, snouted masks, and they mixed a little bit of nutmeg into them, and they believed that this kept them from catching the plague. And they also used nutmeg as a, well, they believed, efficacious cure for the plague if given in time. Nutmeg was worth its weight in gold, and the Dutch had cornered the market in nutmeg, with the exception of that one bloody little island called Run, where Nathaniel was holding out. They sank Nathaniel's ships. They infiltrated Nathaniel with a spy. They convinced Nathaniel to come to a talk. Nathaniel realized halfway there that he had been conned. He jumped out of his boat into the sea and was never seen again. But while he held out, he was the only, well, thorn in the path of the Dutch spice merchants. In a sheer peak of anger, the Dutch merchants then proceeded to cut down every single nutmeg tree on the island of Run. The local people tell you that Captain Nathaniel is still there, demanding his vengeance, and he's seen by sailors and nutmeg farmers very often in the nights. Nutmeg was brought by the Portuguese very sensibly to India, while the Dutch were fighting everybody about it, and planted on the west coast of India and in Sri Lanka. Sadly, they lost Sri Lanka very soon to the Dutch, who were very, very smart about it. But a large amount of nutmeg ended up being planted on the west coast of India, and the Konkan coast produces some of the best nutmeg in the world today. It's also native, apart from being native to the Moluccas, it's also cultivated in Malaysia, the Caribbean, the island of Grenada is very big at it, and Kerala is also a huge producer today. Probably the most famous dry whole spice and powdered spice used in the Indian spice box is cumin. Cuminum ciminum. It's a very interesting flowering plant that you see on the right hand side. It has these beautiful purplish violet flowers. It comes wild from the Indo-Turanian region, the north of Iran, and was used in Central Asia and India very, very early on. The best cumin in India grows on the very, very salty, arid lands of the Rann of Kutch. And in the Rann of Kutch, Unja is the number one clearing destination for all the cumin that is grown in that region and brought for sale. Uh, if you ask the people of the Kutch, they will tell you that while Unja might be the name that you will look for outside of Gujarat, in Gujarat it is the island of Khadir, by the way, on which Dholavira stands. And we keep asking ourselves as excavators whether we'll ever find a little charred cumin in the Dholavira excavations, but we so far haven't. But the best cumin comes from the island of Khadir. And in Khadir, it costs about half as much as we pay for it when it comes to us in the cities of India. Surprisingly, the earliest examples come from Atlit Yam in the 6th millennium BC from Israel. We have seeds from Syria dating to the 2nd millennium BC. And interestingly, we know that they were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, and they were used as embalming spices and things like that, and as preservatives for mummies. They are the absolute base of every single garam masala in India. Dhana jeera. Okay, this is the jeera of Dhana jeera, and Dhana jeera masala, or a cumin and coriander spice, are one of the most base startups for a spice mix powder all over the Indian subcontinent. There is also, by the way, caraway seeds that you're seeing down here, which look very much like uh, cumin, but are completely different. Karam karvi, they are again a sweet spice, and they come to us from Europe of all places and are related to the parsley. The other spice that is mistaken by most people for a variety of jeera or sometimes for caraway seeds, sadly, is Elvendia persica, or Shahi Jeera. Shah Jeera, Shahi Jeera, black cumin. Okay, it's a very, very distinct spice. It's mixed up with both cumin and caraway, much to the sadness of most people. It is much more expensive, uh, a much subtler, milder, and more interesting flavor. And for those of all who use it, I don't need to give you any uh, gyan about it. It's called Shahi Jeera. It's available in smaller quantities. It's much more expensive, and it is one of the top spices in some of the most exalted cuisines in northern India. When we're talking about all of these spices that go into garam masala, we can't not talk about these two very interesting spices, what we call kalo jire or kalonji, which you see on the right hand side, uh, basically called Nigella seeds from the black word Niger, and Nigella sativa. These seeds are used, they're called black caraway, black seed, black cumin, fennel flower, nigella, nutmeg flower, all kinds of things. Roman coriander, black onion seeds is the most common name that you will find. They've got nothing to do with any of these plants. It's a very, very different plant. And it is used in Eastern India and Northern India, very popular in Eastern India. In fact, Bengali, Odia, Bihari, Assamese food relies very, very heavily on the flavors of Nigella seeds. It's a very, very common part of the Pach Fodan or the Fodni masala made out of 5 spices. On the left hand side is its even lesser known cousin or Radhuni, Samogeton involucratus, okay, which the Bengalis call Radhuni. It is very, very limited in use to the extreme east of India. It is surprisingly used in Thailand as a fresh herb. It is used medicinally in Myanmar and Sri Lanka, but not as a spice. And it is used mainly as a spice in Bengal to make something called Radhuni diye dal, which is a dal that is simply made out of a chunk of hot ghee into which you put Radhuni seeds and nothing else, but that goes into the dal and imparts a very beautiful, earthy, slightly celery seed like flavor, which is quite unique in its own right. A very green, herby, and yet earthy flavor. In exceptional Bengali houses, it is also part of their Panchforan. The Panchforan recipe can have variations. Now, this is the other great player in all things garam masala. This is your coriander seed, uh, found in the tomb of Tutankhamun, neatly packed away about 500 ml of the seeds. It does not grow wild in Egypt, so it would have definitely have to come from somewhere or have been cultivated by the Egyptian. The Ebers papyrus, which is dated to around 1550 BC, also mentions the use of coriander in food and as an aromatic, interestingly. Yes, so it was distilled and used for its flavor, the seeds, its oils were used, and we know about it from the pre-pottery Neolithic levels going back about 8,000 to 7,500 years ago at the same site of Aklit Yam and at a few other sites like this. So this is one of the earliest spices grown and used all over West Asia, South Asia, and parts of Central Asia. And along with jeera in India makes up this basic cooking spice called dhana jeera, usually 2 parts dhania, 1 part jeera ground together to make this very, very base spice mix on which you build your garam masalas more often than not. And this is what becomes a very hallmark base of all the great masalas of India. On the left-hand side, we have a little known but important player, Trigonella phenum graecum of fenugreek. This is methi. You have barik methi, which is the OG microgreen used all over Western India. The larger plant is used as a bhaji, as a green leafy vegetable. Methi bhaji is very, very popular, slightly bitter, quite pungent in its own taste, and quite strong tasting. Its seeds are a very important spice, again, a very important constituent of Panchforan in the east and an important constituent of some garam masalas. But interestingly, its most common use is in southern India, where it is used to make dosa, idli, and appe batter. So when the batter is mixed, a small fistful of fenugreek seeds are always placed with the rice and the urad dal, which is soaking, and it is what gives us that very beautiful base taste to a good idli or a good dosa or even a slightly sharp appe. It's used in a lot of pickles, and there is an entire variant of pickles which are made just with methi seeds or methi dal as it's called, and it's a very, very popular uh, pickling spice. On the right hand side is mustard seeds. You cannot start a chonk in India 95 out of 100 times. You start by heating your oil, dropping in some fenugreek seed, dropping in some mustard seeds, and then some curry leaves, and maybe a red chili or two, and then you add whatever else you need to add. Mustard seeds are the small round seeds of various mustard plants. They may be colored black, white, reddish, yellowish. There are 3 or 4 different plants that actually give us mustard seeds. The most popular are Brassica nigra and Brassica juncea, which you see on the extreme right-hand side, and which is the mustard that is usually used in India. In the center, you have Synapsis alba, which is white mustard, which is not very common in India at all. Interestingly, if you notice that image on the right-hand side, you'll see a couple of yellow dots in it. Those are the bits that have lost the outer shell. Now, that's accidental in this case, but we do have an entire process where we deshell the seeds of the mustard plant and make something called mustard dal. And mustard dal, as it's called, is again a very, very important constituent of all the spice mixes of Western India and many of them from Southern India. So achar masala, as it's called, or in what in Gujarat is called kari sambar, which is no kari is hurt in the making of kari sambar, is essentially salt, chilies, and dal, mustard dal, that are all coarsely pounded together to make the base spice, which is used in pickling limes and mangoes and karvandas and all kinds of other things like konda, etc. So grinding and mixing the seeds with water, vinegar, and other liquids, including milk. Yeah, very good pungent mustard. English mustard has milk in it and vinegar and no water at all. Creates a yellow condiment known as mustard. In Bengal, it is very famously, a variant of this is called kashundi. It can be made with semi-ripe mangoes. It gives a mildly sweet, sour taste. And it's a huge condiment in the east of India and is otherwise a part of the basic masalas and tadkas of the entire Indian subcontinent. This is one of the perhaps most unique spices that we have in India. This is Parmontrima perlatum. It grows all the way from Norway down to Southeast Asia. There's a huge distribution. It grows in South Africa also. It is supposed to grow in parts of Australia also, but in South Asia, we use it as a spice called dagad fool or stone flowers. You cannot make a good korma or a biryani or a half a dozen dishes from the northern belt of India without using dagad fool in your spice mix. There are spice mixes, family spice mixes, where the family may not use dagad fool in any other way, but will have a small component in their garam masala, especially the 12, 20, 30 masala variants of garam masala. So dagad fool is the only lichen that is really used in all our spices. And now we finally come to the king of the Indian spices, cucurma longa or turmeric. Turmeric is a beautiful flowering plant of the ginger family, Zingiberaceae, and this is a perennial rhizome. This is the root that you're looking at on the top right hand side. There's also a flower and some powder. The roots are dried. They're a dark orangish color. They're usually treated with a certain bit of lime that they're boiled with to get a certain consistency. And there's a lot of work done on this in Unani, Siddha, uh, Ayurveda, etc., saying how amazingly beneficial turmeric is. Sadly, much to my sadness, the various different clinical trials don't really seem to say anything one way or the other. It was a very famous yellow dye and used to dye the corpse of various monks. The city of Kashi or Banaras was incredibly famous for its usage of turmeric to dye the clothes of sadhus and ultimately of the Buddhist monks. There's a beautiful painting of the Buddha in his yellow robe from Ajanta that you see on the bottom right hand side. We believe that this probably was spread again by those famous guys, the Austronesian peoples, after they dispersed from Taiwan somewhere around 3000 BC. They came to India, and before they came to India, they were already dispersing the turmeric to various other places. So we believe that turmeric actually is a 5,000-year-old spice that came to us thanks to these Austronesian people. It's very, very sacred to their rites. It's a very, very important part of their magical religious activities. And surprisingly, on the west coast of India, where they're supposed to have brought this, it's also amongst some very interesting autochthonous groups of people, a very, very important part of their religious traditions and celebrations. This is Jejuri, one of the most important religious locations in Maharashtra. Uh, the Vari happens over here, the various different dangars come over here, they celebrate the festival of Jejuri, and it is celebrated with turmeric and the dusting of turmeric across the entire temple. The entire temple turns almost completely yellow. And if you go to any Dhangar temple, you will see them using this as a kind of libation, offering, celebration, and all kinds of various different things. These are the same people, these Austronesians who brought this to us, who are supposed to have brought to us the ginger plant. And whilst ginger is rarely a spice by itself and usually used in a, well, ginger garlic paste and doesn't really classify always as a spice, in many parts of India, dried ginger is also powdered and used as soot and is a cousin essentially of turmeric. I know it's difficult for many people to believe this, but ginger and turmeric are cousins, and they have a third cousin called amba halal, which is very, very rarely mango turmeric is what is called amba halal, and it's pickled a lot, but it's also very rarely and now even more seldom used after drying as a spice powder. But these are honorable mentions more than anything else. There are so many more spices. I could keep going on and on for hours about the different spices and what they're used for. I mean, allspice was one thing I mentioned from abroad. There's also the beautiful star anise that comes from China and Southeast Asia to India. We call it chakri ful, for example. There are beautiful twigs that are used in the far east of India, which give you a peppery, slightly bitter, slightly astringent bite, which used to be a part of food and which have almost completely disappeared. And as I said, so many little spices. Chilies, for example, were almost unknown in Ladakh. And it's just one kind of chili that is the entire spice basket of Ladakh. So, for example, places in India like Ladakh use tons of herbs and just one chili variety, a yellow chili variety, which is grown in Ladakh and which is used in Ladakhi food. But there is that one spice nonetheless. So keep spicing it up, ladies and gentlemen. It was an absolute honor to do this lecture. Thank you very, very much to MAP Academy and the entire team over there. And I am very, very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for such an incredible session, Kurush. You've really taken us on a journey into this wild world of spices. I'm sure all of us here know what Wikipedia slash Reddit rabbit hole to go down to now. And as somebody in the comments said, getting quite hungry after listening to all of this. Without further ado, let's get into the Q&A. I know we are already at 8:35, so we are past the 8:30 mark. But thank you so much for staying back, everyone. There are a bunch of questions about chilies, so maybe we can take some of them together. One is, why are Kashmiri chilies or powders so ubiquitous marketing-wise, but the production of Kashmiri chilies negligible in the Jammu and Kashmir? Is it a variety that's migrated to other regions for cultivation? So one is about Kashmiri chilies. Another is, Did Indian farmers take chilies brought by Europeans and do selective breeding to get all the Indian chili varieties that we have today?
So, okay. So Kashmir, about 80 to 90% of Kashmiri chili powder is not from Kashmir or from the variety of chilies called Kashmiri chilies, but is mainly Byadgi chili powder. Okay, and this is an absolute con. So Kashmiri chili powder is supposedly heavily respected for its color and its flavor and not its heat. It's a very mildly heat giving this thing and is usually very famously seen in the famous tikkis of masala that are made for Rogan Josh. You know, the Ratan Jot masala, which is made with, well, a very interesting spice called Ratan Jot, which is unique to that region and which actually gives you the red color of the curry of the Rogan Josh. So there are uses of the Kashmiri red chili, but as I said, it's a milder, more color and flavor-wise chili, and that's why it became very, very popular as being opposed to a spicy chili. Why are there so many chili variants in India? Because the bloody chili hybridizes like it's not. I mean, it's incredibly difficult to keep your chilies true. Okay, if you grow 2 or 3 kinds of chilies together, you're going to get new kinds of chilies popping up left, right, and center. I've seen this happen in front of my eyes in Navi Mumbai, where somebody planted a lot of jalapenos, and those jalapenos just went wild and mutated so hard that they were spicier than any jalapeno that I've ever eaten. So yeah, it's a crazy thing, and people love experimenting, right? So my chili is different from your chili. I've got round chilies happening here. I will keep using those seeds of my round chilies and getting more round chilies. And I will show off my round chilies. You show off your yellow chilies. They're the little Naga bird's eye chilies, which when I was growing up were probably the most lethal chili that I had heard of. Okay. I had never heard of a Bhoot Jolakya at that time. So, yeah. Uh, Hello from, well, wherever, Ahmedabad and Canada and all of that. I think there will be a recording. Hi, Mohammed Farid Wajdi from Indonesia. Good to see you. Hi, Elena from Spain. Sanjeevi from Houston. Hello, hello, hello. The yellow chili from Bihar. There's a yellow chili from Himachal. There is a yellow chili from Uttarakhand. So there are 5 or 6 different yellow chilies. Kali Miri is called Jaluk in Assamese, and Jolokya is the chili from there. Thank you, Priyanka. Uh, so red chilies didn't exist in Rajasthani cuisine before the, well, 17th century, not even the 16th century. In the 16th century, they were still creeping up, going north slowly. So it's in the 17th century onwards that you have red chilies. And for a long time, there were only red chilies in Rajasthan. So your lal mas is actually a gentrified version of something called jungli mas. So you took red chilies or red chili powder, garlic, and salt with you when you went hunting. And this was all you put into your hunt, your meat from the hunt, okay, and cooked, and it was called jungli mas. So lal mas is a gentrified version of, well, jungli mas. Are there other theories around the origins? Oh my God, Nimisha, there's absolutely no end to them. Uh, there's one that says, that Sita was responsible for the Golgappa. Why ever not? She was definitely responsible for the biryani, but that's a story for another day that, Matt might call me back for. Does sound plausible. I think Awadhi chart tastes the best. Fair enough. Your choice. Professor Pant says it came from, yes, I will accept that Pushpeshji probably has hit the nail on the head. But again, there is sadly no record of this. Indians are terrible historians. Did Indian farmers take chilies brought by Europeans and do selective breeding? Oh, most definitely. There is no Chhattisgarh. Okay. Obviously, the Indian government is nuts. But there are chilies in Chhattisgarh too. Uh, how did Andhra Pradesh become the biggest producer of chilies? This is a very, very good question. The Andhrites took to chilies in a huge way. One of the reasons told to me is because pepper didn't grow in Andhra Pradesh. It was too dry and too hot to grow pepper, and Andhra Pradesh was a poor land, especially Rayalaseema and that area, if you call it. I mean, Rayalaseema means the land of stone. So they were, you know, terribly, terribly backward when it came to growing their own spices. And then, hallelujah, along came the chili. And they took to the chili like ducks to water. Now, I don't know how true it is, but it sounds very plausible. Okay. Um, so there is a lot of documentation and research done in our country, Tushita, and there are more and more people working on chilies. And there's some very, very serious articles by botanists and by chemists and by pharmacists on chilies. The DRDO actually has a weapon that uses capsaicin. Yeah, it's a crowd control bomb and stuff like that that we don't like to talk about, but yeah, it's there. Hare Krishnas never put chili in the khichdi completely because it's not OG, right, Peter? Similarly, when you look at the food of the Ayers, when they do Shraddh in South India, there are no chilies, there are no potatoes, because these were things that came in much later, not part of the OG repertoire. So very, very true. Uh, if you go to Bengal traditionally, the tomato is called a Bilaiti Begun, which means that it's a European aubergine, telling you about its origins. So yes, most definitely, all kinds of things like this. Yes, India imports, sadly, Barbara, very, very true and very sad, a large amount of pepper from Vietnam, and we send away some of our best pepper out. Yes, and it comes into Vizinjam in Kerala, and it is in the pepper exchange in Kerala that it's traded and then sold to the rest of India. So this is a really, really cruel blow. And thank you, Barbara, for pointing it out. Allspice is used with crawfish in Oregon and other US states. Thank you, Elena. I didn't know this. Is dalchini true cinnamon? No. Dalchini is basically taj, false cinnamon or Chinese cinnamon or Indian cinnamon. Take your pick. Egyptians used up all their spices on mummification. Yes, Karishma. Yeah, so them Egyptians. So, by the way, coriander. Coriander is a big spice in Egypt. To some extent, cumin is also used in Egypt. And, well, garlic, calling garlic a spice is a very, very dangerous thing. Okay. What is the role of spices in preservation of meat? Oh, this is interesting. It's more salt, vinayak, that is responsible for preserving meat than the spices. The spices are, well, an add on layer of protection. So when you make spicy sausages, for example, chorizo and things like that, the spice does help keep away various different insects. Insects do not like chilies, most insects. Most animals will not eat chilies. Chilies are safe to grow in most places where there's animal predation because almost every single animal stays away from chilies. There's some birds that eat them, especially when they're semi-ripe. But, well, and no, parrots don't go zooming into chili farms to eat chilies, contrary to what we're taught in India. Madhu says, I remember many plaques in Rio's Garden Botanico thanking India for a number of spice trees. Yes, and we should have a lot of thank you notes in all our vegetable markets for the Mexicans giving us so much of their food because we've kind of appropriated Mexican cuisine. Beans, tomatoes, potatoes, chilies, papayas, guavas, pineapples, you name it. Um, Diksha, I think yes, there will be a recording map, puts up all of its stuff in recordings. No, Anand, there is no soft copy of the PPT version. I'm sorry. Uh,
There
accidentally
are
only posted it
questions
to.
on mustard, a couple of them on mustard and the difference between the types of mustard used for different sauces.
Agree to that, says Irina. In Spain, we got cumin from the Arabs. We use it a lot. Oh, yes, very much. So the Spaniards probably use more chilies than anybody else in Europe also. Uh, though the Hungarians go on about their paprika, it's the Spaniards who use a lot of chilies and, well, to some extent, Portuguese. In the book about the nutmeg by Amitav Ghosh, it is mentioned that India had a system of classification which was destroyed by the contact with the Europeans hunting spices. I'd like to reserve judgment on that. Please remember, Amitav's books are also partially, well, mm, creative fiction. No offense to him, he's a brilliant writer, but a lot of his books are book fiction books. So you need to ask Amitav for his sources. Um, Are there studies showing how the link between non-indigenous chili varieties and the rise in acid reflux gastro issues among Southeast Asians? I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are. Mega. Follow me on Insta and put that query in, and I will definitely find resources for you and give them to you. By the way, I answer everybody who gets in touch with me on Insta. It might take a little time, but is Radhuni similar to Ajwain? Yes and no. As in the closest thing you could say would be Ajwain, but it is not Ajwain, Aditya. Uh, Unfortunately, I have to hop off. Sarson is used to test heat in oil, right? Yes. Now, lots of things to do with sarson slash mustard. Understand this: in the east in India, sarson was a very big provider of heat, all from eastern India across to, well, parts of Sindh and Punjab and all of that. It was a heat-giving spice. In the East, there is a separate word for the spiciness of mustard as opposed to the spiciness of chilies. So if you go and you speak in Bengali, the word for chili hot is jhal. But for the spiciness and the heat of mustard, the word is jhanj. So telling you that mustard has been used for a very long time in cuisine over there, and they've developed a separate word to separate it from the heat of peppers and chilies versus the heat from mustard. So definitely, okay. Sarson is used to test heat and oil. I don't know, Vihan, but well, you put it in at the right time and it pops. Yes, and then you dump in everything else as fast as you can. At least that's the way I do my tadka. Smita says two questions. My Scandinavian trails use elaichi or cardamom in baking. Yes, it's a mega sweet spice. The Parsis, for example, their go-to sweet spice is nutmeg, cardamom seeds, and sugar that are ground together. Sugar so that you have volume. Otherwise, this is a very expensive spice mix to make, and it tends to get very sticky. The sugar surprisingly makes it less sticky. Don't ask me how this works, but it's what the Parsis will put in all their sweets. Every single sweet preparation, ravo, sev, chapat, karkaria, bhakra, popatji, everything will have this spice mix in it. And after the Europeans came, it'll also have the most expensive spice slash not spice in the world, vanilla. Um, Cardamom and its uptake. So cardamom, white and green cardamom come to us from Indonesia. They were made very popular in the trade with Rome, and huge quantities of cardamom were shipped out via India towards Rome. So India was definitely on the way and definitely started growing cardamom to provide it to that trade, and then ended up consuming a lot of it on its own. What is the difference between the mustards used to make the different types of sauces? Dijon, American, English, Kashundi, etc., etc., etc. So you can use black mustard or andrilla. You can use red mustard, as it's called, which is the more common Indian mustard. You can use the white mustard also. But it's not the mustard that makes the difference, but how you grind the mustard that makes a difference. What you add to it makes a difference. A Dijon is a milder mustard with white wine and a very fine paste of mustard. On the other hand, an English mustard is coarsely ground with vinegar and milk. Yes, vinegar and milk. That's the magic combo. And yes, the milk splits or whatever, but you don't realize it if you do the paste the right way. It adds a little body and it adds a little creaminess to it, okay, without bringing in any taste. So to see, I had an expert mustard maker called Mr. Martus who taught me how to make it. He'd been making it for the British on their ships for years and years and years. So it's the way you treat your grain. How so mustard is also considered a grain. How coarse it is and how it is not. So a very coarsely ground or just smashed mustard uh, paste or condiment is called method ancienne or the ancient method, which is the OG method of just pounding it, soaking it, pounding it, adding vinegar and salt, and presenting it. And you can add raspberries to it, you can add strawberries to it. It's all kinds of fun when you add various things for acid and flavor to it. So it's not so much the so like I said, it's the two main mustard varieties, but well, what's the difference between condiments and spices? So achar is a condiment. Turmeric powder is a spice. Jeera is a spice. Murabba is a condiment. Ketchup is a condiment. HP sauce is a condiment. Worcestershire sauce or Worcestershire sauce as it's called, or Worcestershire sauce, as some people would like to call it, is a condiment. Garum is the OG condiment and the mother of tomato ketchup, and it's made out of fish. Another story, different time, different place. Did we discuss the history of mustard? Where was it first used? So all across West Asia and South Asia, mustard was very commonly used and also used effectively across Europe. It's one of the ubiquitous spices. My mother hates patthar ka fool, but I love it, so it becomes a point of contention. Yes. So Vihan, that's one of those things. It's about individual choice and what I like versus what you like and things like that, and the flavors that we like. Smita Lahiri says, second, as somebody who teaches the history of globalization, I know that in the Renaissance and beyond, spices were a small scale, high value luxury commodity. Yes. See, they could be transported in small quantities because they were high value and sold in small quantities. Sugar and salt were high value commodities in Europe. They were made into cones of salt originally, and you salted. It was the master or the mistress of the house who salted the food from this cone by scraping a knife on it onto the dish as it was served to them first, and it went down there. So therefore, those who sat above the salt and those who sat below the salt, those who sat above the salt were the ones who salted it to their taste, and those who sat below had to suck it up and eat it as salty or less salty as their lords and ladies liked it. When sugar started coming via the Arabs to Europe, it was made in India and it was also made in these cones, and it was called sweet salt because till then sugar in Europe was like cocaine. It was like crack cocaine. Okay, you could make it in very small quantities, or you had honey. So the Indians gave sugar to the world, though sugarcane interestingly comes from New Guinea. And how we ended up making it about 2000 years ago into sugar is a very complex story. We seem to have also sent the sugar making process to China, which then exported the crystalline sugar making process to us. And we call crystalline sugar in India chini, which comes from Tom Achu and his apocryphal Achipur plant, where he made the first sugar like this in Bengal. Whereas uh, the Chinese consider white sugar to be Indian because it was the powdered khand that went from India, which was a dehydrated and turned into batasha and things like that by Buddhist monks. And Harshavardhana was probably responsible for that exchange. Again, another story, another day. Yes. By the way, about nutmeg. Nutmeg is one of the most poisonous things that you can eat in your daily repertoire. Uh, it's a. It makes you feel sleepy. It makes you feel very happy, and the alkaloids in it are mildly poisonous to your system. But if you crush an entire nutmeg and give it to a little baby, you will kill it. It's also used to hide and mask flavors that are quite strong in the various different alcohols and wines that were made in the Mughal court. And there is a beautiful story about Shah Jahan, who, as he was getting older, was not feeling quite sprightly. And he asked the doctors in his court to do something about it. So they all got together and made one of the most expensive elixirs ever made in the history of mankind, which supposedly would have cost somewhere upwards of 3 million US dollars for a single goblet in today's money. And when it was brought to Shah Jahan, he threw the cup away and said, "What do you think I am? An alcoholic?" And they were like, "There's no alcohol in this. Do you think I can't smell it?" So you see, he smelled the nutmeg. And his father almost smelt of that because he was the emperor of Hindustan. And when he drank his wine, which kind of smelled foul, he could afford to put nutmeg in his wine, which was the king of spices at that time. And low value, it was not grown in India. It came all the way from the Moluccas. So completely, Smita, completely right. So how did the political economy of the spice trade change? Well, the Americans were hugely responsible for it. When the Americans came out to start trading in the world in the 19th century, they broke most of the monopolies of the European states and they made the spice business far more democratic than it had ever been before. And by doing so, they also opened up new markets to manufacture it because they wanted markets that they could control, as opposed to the markets that the Europeans controlled. So they helped open up new markets and new areas where these were now planted and grown. And this kind of completely disrupted the Dutch British monopoly on spices that existed till that period. But it's a huge conversation. We can always get in touch, Smita. Always happy to do so. Mm, how
Kurush,
far does the
I do.
history of garam masala go? Blah, blah, blah. 2 minutes. Sadaf has a very good book called Masala Mandi. Yes. Pakistani style dishes where ginger is a tempering spice. All your, what's it called? Uh, mm, all your overnight cooked dishes of meat will all use julienne of ginger as an add-on at the end and things like that. The Vedas mention soma. Soma is not a spice. Soma is most probably ephedra. It's a herb. It's very well known to us. It's mildly hallucinogenic. Uh, do you see the journey of spices evolve in the age of packaged offerings? Oh, yes. Let's not go down that road, Suktara. Um, whole spices versus powdered spices. Preferably, everybody purchased whole spices and powdered them. Today, we want an easy way out because it's a bit of a pain in the backside to powder them. Of course, we've got really good machines now to do so, and we should make our own. It makes sure that things don't get adulterated. For example, the number one adulterated in chili powder is brick dust. Good old red bricks are crushed into dust and mixed into chili powder. Hi, Aima. So good to see you here. Recommendations on a good book or papers. Jochum, get in touch with me on Insta and I'll share 10, 20 books with you. Spices and seeds. What is the life of most spices? Divankita, put them in airtight bottles in a freezer and they'll live forever. Thank you, Katan. Thank you, Marjorie Rodriguez. Love you. Thank you, Mega. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Abhilash. Thank you. Anaga. Diksha saying webinar will be available. Yes, hashtag pure chilies. Thank you, Priyanka. Uh, lots of stuff. Aida, again, get in touch with me on Insta. It's also Kurush Dalal @gmail.com if you want to try write to me, but happy to do so. Blah 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 blah. Tamarind should be considered a spice. Ooh. Well, why not if you want to? And then we'd have to add so many other things, right? Bimbli and uh, kokum and kochumpuli. Those are souring agents, they're not spices. Any Adivasi cuisine from Vidarbha? Nobody Anand has yet written on it. The only Adivasi cuisine book is by uh, the lady from Gujarat, and it's a brilliant book. It's just out. In fact, I have a copy lying somewhere right here, and I can't find it just now. But yes, fabulous book. Okay. Um, capsaicin is a lacrimal substance. Yes, it gets all of you. Would I come to Toronto to present on spices? Madhu, anytime. Send me a ticket. Very, very happy to be honored to come, Madhu. Blah, 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 blah. Vietnam is producing black pepper many times. Yes, I agree. Book recommendations, lots. Again, write to me and I'll do so. In paella, you use saffron. Yes, saffron is one of the few things that I would consider a spice which I haven't included. Yes, you're right. I should have perhaps included saffron in the list of spices. Mia culpa. Is charoli a spice or a nut? It's definitely a nut. I did take dry ginger right at the end and give it an honorable mention. Ferment fish to make garam. There's people making garam now in the Mediterranean. Just buy it from them. It's much easier on the neighbors than fermenting your own fish. Thank you, Ramya. Thank you. Thank you, Snigdha. If nutmeg is poisonous, why is it considered a plague cure by the doctors? Because they were stupid, Snigdha. That's why. Uh, I will write a book someday. Thank you. Thank you. Very kind. Roots to Roots is the name of the handle of the lady. I forget her name just now. I just met her last week and my brain is getting a little soft. Thank you very much, everybody. I think we finally reached the end.